August 19, 1944. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery sat in his headquarters in Normandy, composing a telegram to Field Marshal Alan Brooke, Chief of the Imperial General Staff in London. The message was marked personal and most secret. It would never appear in official war records. Montgomery wrote, "Patton has broken out of Normandy and is racing across France with no regard for proper logistics or coordinated operations. His reckless advance is creating a strategic liability that will cost us dearly. American Third Army is a danger to Allied operations. Eisenhower must bring Patton under control before his theatrics cause a catastrophe." This wasn't tactical criticism. It was a character assassination of the most successful Allied general in France, and Montgomery meant every word. The telegram came at a moment of extraordinary Allied success. Operation Cobra had smashed through German defenses west of Saint-Lô in late July. American forces had exploited the breakthrough brilliantly. By mid-August, Patton's Third Army was racing across France, liberating towns faster than German forces could retreat. To American commanders, this was exactly what mobile warfare should look like: fast, aggressive, exploiting enemy weakness before they could recover. Patton was doing to the Germans what German panzer divisions had done to France in 1940. To Montgomery, it was dangerous improvisation that violated fundamental principles of warfare. Montgomery had commanded Allied ground forces during the Normandy invasion. He had directed operations methodically, building up overwhelming force before attacking, securing flanks before advancing, maintaining careful control over supply lines and unit positioning. This was professional generalship as Montgomery understood it. Patton's approach was the opposite. He advanced on minimal supplies. He left flanks exposed. He pushed his divisions beyond what logistics could properly support. He created chaos in German rear areas by moving faster than they could respond. Montgomery saw this as recklessness. Patton was gambling with Allied lives and Allied strategic objectives for personal glory. Worse, his success was undermining Montgomery's entire operational philosophy. The telegram to Brooke was Montgomery's attempt to reframe what was happening in France. Patton wasn't achieving brilliant success. He was creating conditions for future disaster. His advance would outrun its supplies and collapse. German forces would counterattack his exposed flanks. The entire Allied position would be compromised by one general's ego and aggression. Montgomery urged Brooke to pressure Eisenhower to halt Patton's advance and bring Third Army under proper operational control. This meant stopping Patton's independent operations and subordinating Third Army to Montgomery's overall plan for methodical advances with secure supply lines. Brooke received the telegram at the War Office in London. He understood immediately what Montgomery was really saying. The British Field Marshal was watching an American general achieve dramatic results using methods that made British caution look pedestrian. If Patton succeeded through aggressive improvisation, it would call into question everything Montgomery claimed about the necessity of methodical operations. Brooke sent a carefully worded response. He suggested Montgomery document specific operational risks created by Patton's advance. If Montgomery could demonstrate that Third Army's operations were creating concrete strategic problems, Brooke could raise the issue with Churchill and through British channels to Eisenhower. Montgomery's response included detailed criticisms that revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of what Patton was accomplishing. August 21, 1944. Montgomery sent Brooke a follow-up telegram outlining his specific concerns about Patton's operations. First, logistical overextension. Third Army was advancing faster than supply convoys could support. Patton's divisions were running on minimal fuel and ammunition. Montgomery claimed this created vulnerability. German forces could cut Patton's supply lines and isolate Third Army deep in hostile territory. Second, exposed flanks. Patton was driving east toward the German border without properly securing his southern flank. German forces in southern France could theoretically counterattack into Third Army's lines of communication, cutting off forward units. Third, lack of coordination. Patton was operating semi-independently, making operational decisions without consulting Montgomery or coordinating with British forces. This fragmented Allied strategy and created gaps in the advance that Germans could exploit. Fourth, strategic confusion. Patton's rapid advance was capturing territory, but not destroying German forces systematically. German units were retreating faster than Third Army could engage them. This meant the Wehrmacht was preserving its forces for future battles rather than being destroyed in France. Montgomery concluded that Patton's operations were tactically impressive but strategically counterproductive. The proper approach was methodical advance with overwhelming force, destroying German units rather than bypassing them, maintaining secure supply lines rather than gambling on speed. Each criticism revealed Montgomery's conventional military thinking, and each criticism missed what Patton actually understood about the strategic situation in France. Patton wasn't overextended. He was exploiting German psychological collapse. Wehrmacht units in France were retreating in disorder. They had lost confidence in their ability to stop American advances. Patton's speed prevented them from establishing new defensive lines. Every day Third Army advanced was a day German forces couldn't reorganize. Patton's flanks weren't dangerously exposed. They were protected by German confusion. Wehrmacht commanders didn't know where Third Army was or where it was going next. They couldn't coordinate counterattacks against forces moving too fast to target. Patton's speed was his protection. Patton's independent operations weren't fragmenting Allied strategy. They were creating operational flexibility. While Montgomery advanced methodically in the north, Patton exploited opportunities in the south. The two approaches complemented each other, forcing Germans to defend everywhere simultaneously. And Patton's rapid advance was destroying German forces through psychological effect. Units that saw American tanks in their rear areas surrendered rather than fight. Commanders who couldn't establish defensive positions retreated into Germany. The Wehrmacht in France was collapsing not because Patton was killing Germans faster than Montgomery, but because Patton was destroying their will to fight. Montgomery couldn't see this. He measured success by methodical advance and enemy casualties. Patton measured success by territorial gains and enemy demoralization. They were fighting different kinds of warfare. Brooke recognized the problem immediately. Montgomery's criticisms were technically correct according to traditional military doctrine, but doctrine written for static warfare didn't apply to the situation in France. The Germans were beaten psychologically. Exploiting that required exactly the kind of aggressive operations Montgomery was criticizing. Brooke sent a diplomatic response to Montgomery. He acknowledged the field marshal's concerns, but suggested that American operational methods, while unconventional, were proving effective. Perhaps Montgomery should focus on his own sector rather than attempting to control American operations. Montgomery rejected this advice. On August 24th, he sent another telegram to Brooke, this time even more direct. Patton is a strategic liability who must be controlled before his reckless actions create disaster. Eisenhower lacks the strength to manage him. If London will not intervene, Third Army's inevitable failure will vindicate my concerns, too late to prevent catastrophe. Montgomery was demanding British political intervention to limit Patton's operations. He wanted Brooke to pressure Churchill, to pressure Eisenhower, to halt Third Army's advance. It was a remarkable telegram. A British field marshal was asking his government to intervene in American military operations to stop an American general from being too successful. August 25, 1944. While Montgomery was writing telegrams criticizing Patton's operations, Third Army was achieving something Montgomery's methodical approach had never accomplished: the complete psychological destruction of German forces across an entire theater. Patton's divisions weren't just capturing territory, they were appearing in German rear areas, cutting supply lines, overrunning headquarters, capturing communication centers. Wehrmacht units across France were receiving contradictory orders because their command structure had collapsed. German generals didn't know where American forces were because Patton was moving faster than reconnaissance could track him. The effect was devastating. German units that might have fought effectively in prepared positions were retreating in panic because they feared being cut off. Commanders who could have organized defensive lines were instead trying to evacuate their forces before American tanks appeared behind them. This was exactly what mobile warfare was designed to achieve: not destroying enemy forces through direct combat, but destroying their ability to fight through shock and dislocation. Patton understood this instinctively. Montgomery apparently didn't. On August 28th, German forces were retreating through the Falaise Gap, a narrow corridor between Allied armies. This was the opportunity to trap and destroy the Wehrmacht in France. American forces were driving north. Canadian and British forces were driving south. If they closed the gap, hundreds of thousands of German soldiers would be surrounded. Patton urged his forces forward aggressively. He wanted to close the gap completely before German forces could escape. Montgomery was more cautious. He wanted to ensure British and Canadian forces had secure positions before attempting to seal the pocket. The gap wasn't completely closed. Significant German forces escaped, though with heavy losses in equipment and cohesion. After the battle, Montgomery claimed the operation succeeded in destroying German combat effectiveness in France, but he also quietly criticized American forces for not moving fast enough to completely seal the trap. The irony was perfect. Montgomery had spent weeks criticizing Patton for moving too fast and taking excessive risks. Then, when a situation required maximum speed and aggression, Montgomery complained that American forces weren't aggressive enough. Patton noted in his diary, "Monty thinks I'm reckless when I advance quickly and cautious when I don't move fast enough for his purposes. The man is impossible to satisfy because he doesn't know what he wants." What Montgomery actually wanted was for Patton to fail. Not catastrophically, which would hurt Allied operations, but obviously enough to vindicate Montgomery's criticisms. If Third Army's advance collapsed due to logistical overextension, Montgomery could claim he had warned everyone. If German forces counterattacked Patton's exposed flanks successfully, Montgomery would be proven right about the dangers of reckless operations. But Patton didn't fail. Third Army continued advancing. Supply lines didn't collapse. German counterattacks didn't materialize. The strategic liability Montgomery predicted never appeared. By early September, Third Army had advanced over 400 miles from the Normandy beachhead. They had liberated significant portions of France. They had destroyed German army groups through pursuit and psychological pressure. They had demonstrated that aggressive American leadership could achieve results Montgomery's methods couldn't match. Montgomery's telegrams to Brooke became increasingly frustrated. He complained that Eisenhower was giving Patton too much operational freedom. He argued that Third Army was receiving disproportionate logistics support. He suggested that American favoritism was compromising Allied strategy. Brooke finally responded bluntly. Montgomery needed to focus on his own operations rather than criticizing successful American advances. The Prime Minister would not support British intervention in American command decisions, especially when those decisions were producing excellent results. Montgomery was being told by his own superior to stop complaining about Patton's success. September 1944. Montgomery proposed Operation Market Garden, the airborne assault into the Netherlands. When he briefed the plan to Eisenhower and the combined chiefs, Patton sat in the room listening with barely concealed skepticism. Montgomery described Market Garden as bold and imaginative, a single thrust into the Netherlands and across the Rhine, British forces seizing bridges and racing into northern Germany, the war over by Christmas. After the briefing, Patton wrote in his diary, "Monty's plan violates every principle he's been lecturing us about for months. He wants to race ahead on a single road with exposed flanks and extended supply lines. Everything he said was a strategic liability when I did it. Now it's bold strategy when he proposes it." The observation was devastating in its accuracy. Montgomery was proposing exactly the kind of operation he had criticized Patton for executing in August. Aggressive advance, minimal supply lines, exposed flanks, independent operations without coordination with other Allied forces. The difference was that Patton had done it successfully against a broken enemy. Montgomery was attempting it against German forces that had recovered and reinforced. Market Garden failed catastrophically. British airborne forces at Arnhem were destroyed. The operation achieved none of its objectives and cost thousands of casualties. Patton's response was carefully calibrated. He sent Montgomery a sympathetic message, acknowledging British soldiers' courage and sacrifice. He made no mention of Montgomery's earlier criticisms of American operations. He didn't need to. The comparison was obvious to everyone. Montgomery called Patton a liability when he was winning. Then he tried to do what he did and failed. Now he claims we're both victims of bad fortune. The man cannot accept that American generals might actually know what they are doing. The private telegram where Montgomery called Patton a strategic liability in France became one of history's great misjudgments. Montgomery predicted disaster from aggressive operations. He got spectacular success. He proposed his own aggressive operation. He got actual disaster. The irony was lost on Montgomery, but obvious to everyone else. By war's end, even British officers privately acknowledged that Patton's supposedly reckless methods had proven more effective than Montgomery's careful approach in the mobile warfare of the France campaign. Montgomery never publicly acknowledged his telegrams criticizing Patton. His memoirs portrayed their relationship as cordial professional rivalry between Allied commanders pursuing common goals. The private correspondence revealed something different. A British field marshal who fundamentally misunderstood what was happening in France and blamed an American general for succeeding where British methods were failing. The telegram calling Patton a strategic liability was Montgomery's attempt to undermine American success he couldn't match. It failed because operational reality contradicted Montgomery's predictions. Patton wasn't a liability. He was proving that aggressive American leadership could win battles faster and more decisively than British caution. That was the real message in Montgomery's telegram. Not concern about Allied strategy, but fear that American generals were demonstrating British generals' limitations. Montgomery couldn't stop Patton's success through operational criticism, so he tried to stop it through political intervention. It didn't work. Patton kept advancing, Montgomery kept complaining, and history recorded which general's methods actually won the campaign in France.